Bonjour, hello everyone. My name is Adrielle. I am an American who lives in Paris, and today we're going to be talking about Paris travel tips. So I have received so many comments on this, and as a result, I'm really going to just do one video where I really sum up some travel tips that will benefit you during your next trip to Paris. And these travel tips are going to work kind of for anyone. They're going to be whether you're a woman traveling solo, or you're traveling with a family, or you're in a couple, whatever. It's a girls' trip, etc. The point is that these tips are really meant to kind of help with your traveling and to kind of give you something to really just keep in mind when you're going through Paris. So, with that said, let's get into it. I have broken all of these kind of points and tips down into various categories, and so I'm just going to kind of talk through each of them. I'm going to talk about safety, kind of where to stay, transport, where to eat, all of those sorts of things, and with any luck, we'll be able to get through this video in like 30 minutes. Okay. So let's get moving. Okay, so the first topic I want to talk about is safety. Obviously, that's one of the most important ones. It's particularly important if you are a woman and you are traveling alone. And so there are just some key things that I want to note about safety and kind of keeping in mind like safety when you're out and about. So first and foremost, I will say this, Paris is not nearly as dangerous as it may seem on television, or frankly, even the US. The US is much more dangerous, unfortunately, than Paris. Really, what you have to worry about in Paris is petty crime. You have to worry about people, pickpockets, basically. So someone who's gonna rob you. So that's really kind of how you want to be. Think about it, is that you have to be, I would say, much more mindful of your stuff and your persons, because people are more likely to try to grab your phone, grab something like that, and rob you that way. And it's generally not robbery of aggression. It's more so someone touches you on your shoulder and you don't even recognize, but they touch you on your shoulder, that distracts you, and then they use their other hand to take off your necklace and off they go. So that's why I say that it's really about being mindful of, the petty crime here. So first and foremost, when it just comes to being out and about, some safety tips. And I've written them down, so excuse me for looking down at them because I want to just make sure I don't miss anything. So first and foremost, one of my main rules as someone who, before I moved here, I traveled to Paris a lot. I traveled to other cities by myself. I was kind of I'm a traveler. I love to travel, and if I don't have someone to go with, I go on my own. So, but one of my tried and true rules is I never let anybody within 2 arms length of me. So I believe very, very firmly, and I want a head start. If I have to start running, I want a head start. So I really kind of take the view of you have to be always kind of 2 arms length away from me. So I have 2 things happening with my face at any given moment. I seem to look happy and approachable, people can ask me for directions, but then at the same time, I also look very don't mess with me, very no nonsense. So those 2 things, play out in different ways throughout the day generally. But if someone wants to stop me and ask for directions, oh, excuse me, or, I instantly, the first thing I do is I grab all of my belongings, I put them close to me. I may turn to the person, but I then move back. And I would say that one of our characteristics as Americans is we are very much taught to be nice and blah, blah, blah. You need to throw that out of the window. You really do need to be okay with being a little bit rude, a little bit off-putting, and kind of switching that, because it's going to keep you safer, right? It's going to keep people further away from you. So that's one. Always 2 arms length away. Next up is that I always like to keep my back to the wall. So if I'm on the metro, I tend to stand closer to the wall. Rather than closer to the platform. I do not stand all the way against the wall, because sometimes there are mice down there and I'm not looking to have a moment with Ratatouille. but I really do kind of keep my back to the wall. If I have to stop on the street and look at directions on my phone or something, I always recommend that if you're a tourist, you put your back to the wall, and just be careful you're not stepping in any dog pee or whatever, but put your back to the wall so that someone can't come behind you. You know, protect your six, as they say in the military, right? So your 6 o'clock, what's behind you. So always protect that so that you kind of see like what's happening in front of you, and your back is kind of a bit more secure, so you don't have to worry about someone coming up behind you. One thing I want to also say is, you know, this is not the place to bring something flashy or bling or expensive. Like, do not walk around with like your Chanel, your Louis Vuitton, that sort of thing. I've said this in other videos. You know, your nice gold jewelry, like leave that stuff at home. It is not the place to have that, particularly if you are a tourist. If you are a tourist, someone will mark you as a tourist before you even recognize it. So I recently heard this girl on social media. It was so sad. She gave a story about how a man and a woman seemed to be a couple. They passed her and her sister by, and then they came back and they were like asking for directions or something like that, and they were so distracted that like they didn't even notice that like meanwhile someone behind them who was part of this came up and took the gold necklace right off of her neck, and she didn't notice it until, you know, for much later, and by that point it was, you know, they were gone. This is what I mean, like this is going to happen faster than you could ever expect it, and it happens just in a very innocuous way. It's not someone just yanking the necklace off your neck and running away. It's people tricking you, and you know, you're distracted by the right hand, so you don't know what the left is doing. It's like a magician, right? Like it's like a magician. So basically, just don't bring it. Like, this is not the place to bring it. I literally never walk out of my house with anything real on. Everything on my body is fake. I'm just well, not my boobs, but you know what I mean. Like my jewelry and stuff is so yeah. It's really a safety issue, and I just strongly advise that as a tourist that you don't come here with anything flashy or bling. Next up is plan out your route before you leave your hotel. So like have your map or whatever on your phone and kind of have like some sense of where you're going. Now that I live here, I mean that's a habit I still do. I do it less and less because I kind of know generally where I'm going, but it really does help if you are a tourist to have some sense of orientation as to where you're going, and to be able to kind of walk like you're with purpose, like you belong here and you know what's up. Another thing that I want to note is that when it comes to minimizing the risk of pickpocketing, there are certain common scams. One of them is a clipboard scam, and it will be groups of women and young girls, and they'll try to kind of swarm you with like their you know, clipboards. Think about it. You're a tourist. Why does anybody need your signature on a sheet of paper? These are scams. They're meant to get close to you so they can rob you. And so if you see the groups of girls, just hold out your hand. No. Wave, keep them away from you. Hold your things closer to you. Don't let them near you. This is actually where an umbrella can come in very, very handy. You know, like just no. Like just shout, be loud, be whatever. You know, and have no shame in that. Like be unapproachable. It's in your interest to be unapproachable. Another thing about pickpockets is you want to be really careful about your phone. One of the things they do now is they grab people's phones and they run as soon as the bell sounds and jump off the metro. You know, consider getting a phone cord. I've shown you guys mine before, but this is a phone cord. You know, I have it. I keep it all the time. Mine is like going strong. Get that. Consider getting one of those, like a phone case with a cord. I would say is a really good idea to kind of protect your phone, or just kind of keep it in your purse and keep it close, right? Like always keep things close to your chest. Another thing is about like just your purse, like with your personal belongings. If you're a man, I posted a photo on the community board of like how men often carry their belongings to kind of keep them secure. As a woman, we generally have crossbody bags. We obviously have our phone cords. We hold our bags close. You want to keep your bag close. If you have a tote bag and that tote bag doesn't zip, you're a mark. Like someone, you are a total mark. Your bag, you want a bag that closes, and you want to keep the zipper part, like the part that closes, like where the zipper part is, facing towards you, like in towards your body. You don't want that to be behind you, because then someone can unzip your purse from behind you. You want all of that stuff to be kind of facing into you and then holding it closer. Okay, so next up, gonna keep going. A few more tips on just kind of when out and about, and some safety tips is, generally, I would say, particularly if you're a woman, you're traveling alone, I always take the view of not being out late. So I am back in my hotel before, the sun sets. If I decide to take a dinner outside of the hotel, I will do that dinner someplace close to the hotel. I just generally, I want to be back in my hotel before, by nighttime. I think that it is one of the things that is definitely much more secure, much safer for you, is to kind of be back before evening, because you don't know this area. Spending a month here, spending 2 weeks here, whatever, I used to do that stuff too, but doing that, you are not, it is completely different than living here. Living here, daily life is just completely different. And so you want to be very careful when you are out and about by yourself, because you don't fully know all the things about the neighborhood, the area, and things that are happening that, say, someone who is a local is going to know, right? There are just some things that we're going to hear about before you do. So that's why I just say, just don't be out late. And this one is another one. Big safety tip, particularly if you're a woman, you are traveling alone. Do not find yourself alone. And what I mean by that is, if you find yourself walking down the metro stairs and you get to the point where you're supposed to hit the turnstile and you realize there is no one there, consider maybe taking the bus, right? Consider maybe going back up where there are people. I have a friend recently, she was in a good neighborhood in Paris. She was walking down the metro steps to get on the metro, went through the turnstile. She said all of a sudden she realized as she was descending further down to the metro platform, she realized she was completely alone. But then all of a sudden there were just these two guys who kind of appeared out of nowhere, and they were kind of walking behind her. And she said instantly, her heart sank. She said she sat down in the seats, and one guy sat on each side of her. And she was just like, okay, I have to stay calm. The train comes in 2 minutes. So she just sat there. She said she waited until the train come. And she said that the moment the train came and the doors opened, the guys obviously thought that she was going to immediately get up. And so they were clearly using that kind of as a moment to try to rob her. And so she said that she didn't move though. And they clearly looked a little bit, she said they were clearly a little bit puzzled. They glanced at each other about the fact she didn't move. And so she said she just stood there and she just sat there and saw as people exited the train and they left. And she said just as it looked like the buzzer was about to sound, she jumped up and ran on the train, and it really surprised the guys, and the door shut and they were left on the platform. This is what I mean about finding yourself someplace alone. This is actually a lot of times why I take the bus, particularly if I'm out late at night. The metro is generally pretty safe. There are lots of police and stuff, but it's very windy and it's up and it's down, and you can very easily find yourself in a corridor where you are all by yourself, and you just never know what you could encounter. And so I just think it's really important, particularly if you're a woman and you are traveling by yourself, just make sure you don't find yourself on a street, in a train, car, etc. alone. Those are never good things. So yeah. So those are some of the safety tips as far as just kind of being out and about. Now let's talk about safety tips when it comes to your hotel. So I personally prefer to stay at hotels over Airbnbs. Airbnb, for a number of reasons. I actually don't think Airbnbs are as secure as Airbnb makes it seem. I believe that there is a lot of, robbery, etc. that happens in Airbnbs. Plus, I've had, hosts, I found that hosts are sometimes way crazier than at a hotel, right? Like a hotel, you can ask for late checkout at 2 or something like that. Whereas in Airbnb, they're you have to check out by 10 a.m. in the morning, whatever. Particularly because at least with a hotel, you kind of know what you're getting. Right, if you stick to big hotel chains, you know what you're getting. Marriott, Hilton, blah, blah. You're getting something pretty consistently. And if you have a problem, there's somebody you can complain to about that situation. So that's why I really do say that I personally prefer hotels when it comes to traveling for safety, and particularly when I am traveling alone. As a woman, I prefer a hotel, and I will opt for a nice hotel. Hotel safety, once you get in your room, always immediately lock that emergency lock, but also invest in that little door jamb thing, and shove that little door jamb thing underneath your door. It's the little alarm, and so it's a way to kind of add a little bit of extra level of security. I also don't charge things to my room. So if I opt to go down to the hotel bar or whatnot, I never leave, my drink or my food unsupervised. But I also don't charge things to my room because, sometimes you might have a bartender or some crazy person who is, there in the lobby, sees, oh, I'm in room 208, and then boom, all of a sudden you have somebody knocking at your door at 2 in the morning. Okay. So those are my general overall Paris safety tips. There are going to obviously be more kind of throughout this video as we get into kind of particularities of different situations and whatnot, but those are just general safety tips. So safety we considered covered. Okay, so next up, let's talk about tips for getting around Paris, transportation, that sort of thing. First and foremost, let's talk about taxis and Ubers, okay? So in Paris, there are unofficial taxis. Those are the people where you're sticking out your hand and they'll pull over and be oh, what do you, where are you going, blah, blah, blah. And those people can charge you anything they want. I literally once had a taxi bill, it was $50. And I had no idea it was an unregulated taxi until I got into it. Learned my lesson, okay? Regulated taxis have the little green taxi light on top, okay? A company that is the biggest taxi company in Paris, very well known, it's G7, and you'll see it, it's written on the side of the car and on the back. I personally like to take G7s because I know what they are, right? That it's going to be a set rate, what's going to happen. And so I personally prefer taking a G7 taxi. Now, here's the thing about taking a taxi, is that they will tell you, you should, always ask if they take card, okay? And if they say yes, they do, say, no, I want to be sure, because I don't have anything other than a card, and I don't have the ability to go to the ATM to take any money out. So please confirm that you can take a card. Because a lot of times what will happen is they'll say, yes, I can take a card, and then you get in and they're oh, the card machine's not working. Now I have to take you to an ATM and you have to give me cash. They want that because they don't want to have to declare it. They can steal it. Okay, so that's why they're doing that. And so they'll say, oh, well, no, I sorry, the card machine isn't working, you don't have any cash, whatnot. No, so that's why you have to be no, I want to make sure you take card because I cannot take any money out of the ATM machine, so please confirm that you can accept card. This is, again, why I like to take the G7 taxi, is because they have to be able to accept card, and they have a call center, so if you have a problem with one of their cabs, you can literally call the number and be I'm in your cab, and this guy isn't taking card, and he told me he could take card. If you do opt to pay with cash, that's something fine, you can definitely do that, but double check the change before you get out of the cab, right? So ask them to show you in number form, you know, how much exactly it is. They'll give you a little ticket receipt. Take that, look at it. You know, if it's €5.50, give them €6, give them 10, whatever. But then before you get out of the cab, count it. Be shameless. Count it. I have had people give me money of other countries. I've had people not give me the complete change. People will like cheat you. They really, really will, particularly if you are a tourist. This is something I have had happen in a variety of European countries. So this is not France particular or Paris particular. So just know that. Most recently, I was at a boulangerie. I bought something, I think a pain au chocolat. I think it was, you know, €3 or it was €2 something. I gave him 5. And he gave me back, like, he shorted me like 20 cents on the change. And at first he was trying to pretend like be like, oh, madame, like, you're wrong. And I was like, I can count. Like, and I literally typed in €5 on my phone and then subtracted it by how much and showed it. And then I showed him like how much money he had given me, and he was like, oh, and then he gave me my money, right? It was only 20 cents, but that's my 20 cents. So I want it. So that's why I say you just have to double check. Now you might say, well, taxis sound difficult. Why don't I take Uber? No. Europe Uber is completely different than American Uber, and I never ever take Uber here. Ever. Never. So the Uber drivers in Europe have more rights than they do in the US. So they are way more emboldened than they are in the US. So for example, you know, in the US, if an Uber driver cancels a certain number of rides or refuses to accept a ride, they get dinged by Uber. In France and Europe, that does not exist. So literally, I have friends who have been trying to order Ubers to get to the airport for 20 or 30 minutes in just Uber after Uber cancels. Most recently, I was at the train station with my family, and we were trying to come back. And they wanted me to order an Uber. I was like, no, let's just wait for a G7 taxi. Finally, I gave in, ordered the Uber, and I think 3 or 4 Ubers canceled on us, like before we found one. To me, it's not worth the hassle when it comes to Uber. Uber, I find, is incredibly unreliable in Paris, like ridiculously unreliable in Paris. So I just do not use it as a mode of transport. I would always rather take a taxi. Furthermore, taxis in Paris, they can use special taxi lanes so they can go faster. They don't get stuck in traffic as much, except because they can use these special taxi lanes. So it's generally cheaper, frankly, than an Uber is as well. So that's why I always prefer to just take a taxi if I absolutely have to. Now, let's also talk about buses and public transport. So trains are fine in Paris. They're consistent. They run on time. They're generally, you generally have a 2-minute wait between each train. So it's not like you generally have to wait too long to get on a train. I love to take the trains. Personally, though, I prefer the bus. To me, the bus is the best way to get around. You get to see the city. I don't like being underground at all. I like being able to see things, so I prefer the bus. The one thing is that the bus is slower, right? If there's a strike, like all of a sudden you can find like there's just no bus. The bus will say it's going to be there and it's not there, right? Like it's just, I find the bus is a bit more of a, if you have someplace to be at a certain time, you take the metro, right? Like, or you just leave, give yourself a ridiculous amount of time on the bus. So I'm a big bus person. I say, take the bus. I also think the bus generally is more secure than the train station because, as I mentioned in prior videos, there's a conductor, so pickpockets have a harder time operating on the bus than they do on the trains. This does not mean they don't operate on the bus. Let me be clear. They do. It's just they have a harder time operating on the bus than the train. So yeah. Okay, so two more points when it comes to transit because I forgot to make them. So one is as far as when you're coming from the airport, if you choose to take a taxi, when you exit generally the gate, there are going to be all these people asking you if you want a taxi. You just say no. Follow the sign Follow the sign that says taxi. You want to get in the official taxi line. There is a flat rate on taxis from the airport into Paris. That's why you want to take an official taxi and not the Uber. The Uber can charge you whatever they want. The flat rate taxi, the official taxi is going to charge you a flat rate to get into Paris. I believe it's like 62 euros or something like that, or a little less than that. So choose, if you want to take a taxi, take the taxi line. Second thing to note is that if you opt not to take the taxi, that's cool, you don't have to. You can take the RER, it's called the RERB, you can take that into Paris. There is an express one that will skip a bunch of the like stops in between and get you into Paris. You have to be very careful if you are coming from the airport and you are taking the RER, and the reason why is the pickpockets are no joke. So when I was coming back from Greece, I had some pickpockets try to do the clipboard scam on me, and the moment the woman held up the clipboard, I turned to all my belongings and I put myself over them because I knew what was happening. So she knew immediately, I knew, and she like stood there, tried to kind of continue putting it in my face, but I just turned my head like this and I was like over my belongings, and she eventually walked away. But her and her friends like continued to look at me the whole train ride, and I looked at them and I got out my umbrella and I was like, all right, somebody comes over here again, we can hit you. That's why I say that if you're going to do it, you just take the express train. There's an express RERB from the airport to Gare du Nord, and that is going to be like the fastest, and you're going to deal with a little bit less like riffraff than that one. So you know, that's just something to keep in mind. And then what you could do is, if you want to, you know, once you get to Gare du Nord, come out at Gare du Nord and, you know, take a taxi to the hotel. One thing I have to say. Okay, you know, Europe is old. You are going to walk a lot in Paris, like a lot. There are so many stairs. It is really not handicapped accessible. So if you have mobility issues, or you're coming with someone who has mobility issues, this is why a taxi is generally going to be the best way for you, at least to get from the airport into Paris. If you have children, lots of luggage, you know, take the taxi, don't take the train. It's too much of a hassle. And be mindful that, you know, there are an astronomical amount of stairs, so you're always going to be walking up and down stairs, all around, every place. So you have to be very, very careful of that and really, really keep that in mind. We're going to keep going on our Paris tips because I only have a few more. We're almost done. So let's talk about kind of where to go, what to do. One of the things people always tell me is, you know, I want to hear the non-touristy things to do. Tell me about where to go that's, you know, non-touristy. Let me be clear, you are a tourist, and that is okay. Like, it is perfectly fine to be a tourist. The non-touristy stuff is like the non-sexy stuff. It's the stuff you do at home, right? Like, you go to the butcher, you go to the dry cleaner, etc. Part of the reason I also often kind of feel a little uncomfortable with like really giving people really non-touristy things to do in Paris is because once you get out of the non-touristy areas, you lose the ability to speak English. So French people do not speak English. Before, when I visited, I thought I was getting in like the non-touristy areas, but I wasn't. I was very much in like, very often like into more touristy areas of Paris. And I can tell you this, once I moved here, I was shocked. I was like, oh my gosh, I need to learn French very, very fast. You don't want to end up in a non-touristy area because you won't be able to understand anyone and they won't be able to understand you. So I always tell, like, it's okay, like, do the touristy things, be fine. The next thing I want to say is I don't mean to hurt your feelings on this. If you took high school French or college French, I understand it. However, I hate to break it to you, you don't speak French. What we learn in school in the US is not, you don't speak French. Unless you have lived in France before and you know that you speak French, you don't assume you speak French. So don't go to, you know, restaurants and be like, oh, I'll take the French menu. I'll give you, once I think during like my third trip or something to Paris, I went into a restaurant and I was like, no, I speak French, you know, I'll take the French menu. So I looked at the menu and I was like really confused by like most of the things on there. I was like, ooh, like this is confusing. I don't think I really understand this, but okay. So I ordered something that's like beef, boof. I know what boof is. Boof is beef. Like, I'll take that. I was like, I'll take that. You all, you know what I got? I got beef tartare. Do you know what beef tartare is? Let me tell you. Beef tartare is ground beef, not cooked, with some diced tomatoes and sometimes some cilantro or something else. That's what it is, and a little bit of seasoning. I think I could only muster one bite of it before I sent it. It was like, I'm sorry, but I need you to cook this. I'm sorry, I just can't eat. I can't eat it. I'm sorry, I tried. I say that as an example of the fact that like you don't speak French. You think you do, but you don't. So like, just ask for the English menu. It's okay. The English menu is going to have very weird descriptions for things. It's still better than the French menu if you don't speak French. So just do that. All right, so now that I've said that, let's talk about kind of where to go, what to do. So since you're going to stay around tourist sites, that's fine. You're just going to need to be more careful about pickpockets because pickpockets operate very heavily around tourist sites. So really just be very, very careful of that. Be mindful of your belongings. Keep things close to you. Always going to have things close to you. I would strongly recommend against carrying things like backpacks, you know, like those. That is like, you know, a pickpocket's dream. Just put your stuff in a tote bag, you know, put the essentials in a small purse that you have close to you, put like everything else in a tote bag that you carry around with you, and you'll blend in very much like a local here in Paris. Another thing that I really want to note, and I did this when my family was here, and I think it was a lot of fun and a great, you know, tourist activity and a great way to see a lot of the city, was a big bus tour. Like if you are coming to Paris alone, or frankly you're coming in a family, I think a big bus tour is a lot of fun because you can hop on, you can hop off, and you'll be able to see so much of the city. You'll be able to get to all the major tourist sites and be able to do it in a way that I would say is a bit more secure and contained, particularly if you are visiting for the first time. Another thing I will note is a really great thing to do here in Paris is vintage shopping. There's so many great vintage shops here in Paris. I obviously have, you know, a guide on, you know, vintage shops that's in, you know, my store that you can look at. And then, you know, I always talk about like vintage shops you can visit, you know, on my socials. But if you want to know like things to do tourist stuff, do vintage shopping, do a big bus tour. Like, don't try to go off the beaten path too much. It's just, it's for your own kind of security and whatnot. I think you'll have a better trip if you just kind of stick with what you know. All right, let's talk about where to eat. Almost done. So I get this question a lot. People are always asking me, you know, any restaurant recommendations. So here's the thing. I am going to not be the best at giving restaurant recommendations because what I want to eat because I live here is completely different than like what you might want to eat. And what I mean by that is because I live here and I'm used to eating French food, I can have it all the time. I have my Juju cooks French food, all of that. Because of that, I generally like don't really ever crave French food. What I crave are things like Mexican food, which you cannot get in Paris, okay? I crave American food, like pancakes and like junk stuff. That's what I crave. I'll crave like even British food sometimes. I'll crave like Vietnamese food. And very rarely do I want like French food. I will say that the pasta in Paris, like Italian food, actually tends to be really, really good because we are so close to Italy, but still like the pasta in Italy is 1,000 times better. So anyway, generally I'm probably like not the best for restaurant recommendations. However, if you want French food, and I know everybody when they come to France wants French food, one of the best places to get that is just a local brasserie. Like the local brasseries are all serving French food, all of that stuff. So you'll see things like a croque madame, a croque monsieur. The cheeseburgers here are unreal. They don't even compare to like what you get in America. They're so good. So, you know, things like that are going to be really great. The chicken in France is phenomenal. Like you'll never go wrong with ordering something with chicken in it. You know, it's so good. So I say all this to say that, you know, if you're looking for just French food, basically any brasserie, you can find French food. There is a website, or it's a website slash app, it's called The Forks. I don't know if you can make a reservation through it without having like a French phone number, but I really like to use The Fork as a way, Juju actually loves to use it as a way for us to like go and have dinners, and you tend to be able to get like a discount at a lot of places. Restaurants that I would say that I would recommend include a place called Le Remene. The food was phenomenal there. It's not far from Notre Dame. I have eaten at Giraffe before, L'Oiseau Blanc, Cheval Blanc. These places are, some of those are Michelin stars, so they're really, really good, but they're all like very, very delicious places to eat. Generally, I try to actually avoid a lot of the like super hype places, because I just find that you know, generally like the food is overpriced. Another place you can eat that sells seafood is called Lyon, and they're kind of known for their mussels and their fries. That's a really big French dish, mussels and fries. Le Couple is a place you could eat. There's so many places really to eat in Paris. You're generally not going to go too wrong. Just, you know, look at the reviews on Google. Like, people are very honest here. Like, via Google reviews. That's where people are able to rave if they love it and vent if they don't. So, you know, either take a look at the Google reviews or look at the Forks, either way, to kind of figure out, you know, what a restaurant is rated, what the food is like, etc. And then, you know, just go for it. 2 more points. One, let's talk about bathrooms. So you may or may not know this, but in Paris, a lot of times bathrooms are, you know, there are no public restrooms. So do not expect that you can go into a cafe and ask to use a bathroom. They're generally going to say, you know, no, or they may say yes, but they might be offended, okay? The appropriate thing to do is you order, right? So you order a coffee and, you know, use the restroom. Or if you sit down at a table and you get up and use the restroom, then you need to like go sit back down at that same table and order something, right? You can use the restroom before you order. You know, like there are many times where I have gone into the cafe and I've been like, bonjour, I'll take a cafe noisette, and also where's the toilet? And they're like, it's back there, and I use the bathroom and I come out, I sit down, and I drink my cafe, right? Like, you know, it's a, there's a sprint sometimes in there of urgency, but generally do not expect to be able to just use a toilet in any sort of like restaurant or whatnot without also ordering something. The easiest thing to order is an espresso or a noisette. That is an espresso with a little bit of milk, or you can ask for, you know, a Pellegrino and drink that. You know, then you'll have to go to the restroom again. But the point is that like that is the appropriate way to kind of get access to a restroom in a restaurant. Me and my friend not recently, but maybe a few months ago, we were at the Eiffel Tower. We had to use the restroom, didn't want to use a public restroom, and we asked the man at, you know, the front of this restaurant if we could use the toilet. He said yes. And this woman, maitre d', who I guess didn't realize it, comes running down to us shouting and screaming, how dare you use the toilets without, you know, first asking and not, without ordering anything. And we did ask, and it was this whole thing, and we like got into this huge screaming match, and it's like, you know, I'm still using the toilet, ma'am. And then we came out, she was like, it was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Like, she was like, oh, you know, sorry, I didn't know that you had asked. And I was looking at her like, yeah, well, maybe then you shouldn't have screamed at us, and whatever. Point is, I can go on this, so just order something to use toilets. There are public toilets, okay? So along the Seine, there are public toilets, and they are free to use. There are also public toilets that are free to use. They're in these little metal boxes, and you have to press the button, and there are multiple lights. You know, one light is it's in use, another light is it's being cleaned, and the light after that, like, you can enter. Those are hit or miss. In some neighborhoods, they're great. In other neighborhoods, not so much. It has nothing to do about how nice the neighborhood is, whether or not it's clean or not. It just has to do with how frequently it's being used. So some are nice, some are not pretty at all. If you need to use the restroom at, say, like a West, like one of the Westfield shopping malls, like at Châtelet Léal, those charge. Oh, the restrooms outside of the Louvre, not in the Louvre, but like outside in like the shops area, those charge. So it's something just to be mindful of, is that if paying for the bathroom is generally what's expected. The places you don't have to pay are going to be Galeries Lafayette, BHV, and Le Bon Marché and Printemps. And those bathrooms always tend to be clean. So there's that for you. Last final pieces of travel tips for coming to Paris. First and foremost, always say bonjour, bonjour. When you walk into a shop, when you walk into a restaurant, when you walk into anywhere, say that before you say anything else to someone. It is considered rude to do anything other than that, so always do that. It's very, very important. Always say thank you, merci, say au revoir, bye, you know, those sorts of things. These are just polite ways of communicating. Next up, if you're shopping, if you're out and you're shopping, you're in a store, and you know, you're obviously somewhere other than vintage, feel free to ask for a new item. So I think one of the things in the US we're very accustomed to is, you know, you go and you reach, you grab something off the rack, you know, you look on the rack, you see if they have your size. If they don't have your size in the rack, you assume, you're like, oh, well, they don't have it. Or if you see it, you grab it, then you take it to your fitting room, try it on, and then you know, go and you pay for it. Generally in France, it is expected that you get a new item. Like what they have hanging is not necessarily, you can try that on, but it's not like what you have to buy. So for example, when my family was here, my aunt, my cousin, you know, there were multiple times we were in stores and they're like, oh, well, they don't have my size, or oh, it's not on display. And I was like, that means nothing. Like there is limited display space here. So they're gonna put 2 sizes out and then you have to ask for more. You know, they're gonna put 2 perfumes out and then you have to ask them if they have more. So I had to keep telling them, like, it doesn't matter that they don't have it. It doesn't on display. It doesn't mean they don't have it. So I would say, okay, well, you know, what size do you want? And I'd say, do you have this in this size? And then they go down to the stock room and they look, right? Yes, no. And then they bring it back, right? If they have it, or they tell you they don't. So don't assume that what you see on the rack is everything they have, and don't assume that that's what you have to buy. And final point on travel tips for Paris is when it comes to the pharmacy, everybody loves pharmacy skincare, all of that sort of thing. I will say this, that I think the skincare in the pharmacy is somewhat overrated. So consider going to some place like Oh My Cream, where you're going to get a little bit more variety in skincare. Also go to Galeries Lafayette. They have a huge skincare area, and you can find a lot of really great items. If you find yourself in a situation where you do get sick in France and in Paris, one of the things that you can do is you can go to the pharmacy and speak to the pharmacist like you are talking to a doctor. Like walk in, say bonjour, and then ask, you know, do you speak English? You know, always ask, you know, do you speak English? And if they don't, if they say no, pull up your Google Translate and like type out what is happening and what your symptoms are, because the pharmacist can give you things. I will note this, pharmacists here very often will give you like homeopathic remedies. They'll be like, here, take this thing, and you'll look and the main ingredient is honey. It's like, no, you know, don't be afraid to be like, no, I need something stronger. I need something for a cold medicine, something like that. I have a video that is up on what to do if you get sick in Paris or in France, so definitely go check that out for kind of more details on how to handle being sick. Skirt. Okay, so you may have thought the video was done. However, I am popping back on here to record a section with some information that I completely forgot to mention as far as tips for coming to Paris, okay? So I wrote them down just like the other ones, so I'm going to touch on them all really quickly for you. This video is probably going to be like an hour long by the time we're done with it. Sorry, but I just want to give you everything in one video. Okay, here are 4 more points that I forgot to mention. No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 more points that I forgot to mention as far as tips for coming to Paris. So number 1, money. Okay, so I meant to touch on this in the first video. I don't know how on earth I forgot to, but thank you so much to the person who sent me a message on Instagram asking me this question, or I wouldn't have remembered. When it comes to money and how much money to bring to Europe, the number one thing I would recommend is that you invest in a WISE card, W-I-S-E. So WISE is essentially an online bank account, an online bank, and what they do is they allow you to hold money in multiple currencies. And I personally think the WISE card is perfect for traveling and also if you decide to live abroad. So with the WISE card, the thing is that you sign up online, so you'll get a physical card, but you will also get a digital card, and you can add your digital card to your Apple Pay or kind of whatever is the Android equivalent of Apple Pay. The point is that you can use that digital card to pay, sans contact, that's what we say in French, without, tapping. So you can pay essentially using that at most places, generally almost anywhere in Paris, and also frankly all over Europe. The thing about this is that you can transfer money from your bank account in the US to your WISE card every single day of your trip, or you can just do, kind of a big transfer with your travel money in advance of your trip. And the thing about the WISE card is that once you kind of have transferred that money, you transfer it, add it onto your WISE card in US dollars, you can then convert that immediately into euros, and then as a result, when you're tapping places around Europe, you are paying for things in euros. You can also, the good thing about the WISE card is that you are allowed a certain number of free withdrawals every single month. I believe it's like 6 from ATM. So essentially you can take cash out each day. So or every other day of your trip, instead of having to carry around, a lot of cash at one time. And then this way, if you don't use all of your money, you can easily convert it back to US dollars and then transfer it back into your US bank account, right? It's just so much more easier. So I personally always recommend people travel with a WISE card. As far as how much money to land in Paris with, I would say to land with no more than 100 euros, just because you want some money when you touch down, but you just don't want a lot. You're very disoriented when you get into an airport when you first arrive. So it's best to just limit the amount of cash on you. And also, it's too easy to lose cash. It's too easy for people to steal cash. And frankly, once you get into Europe, I have generally found you're gonna get the best exchange rates when you're in the US with an actual bank usually. And then once you get into Europe, particularly once you get into Paris, you can't walk into a bank and exchange money. You have to go to those money exchange counters. And those people, not all of them, but a lot of them will cheat you. So I'll give you an example. When my aunt, she came to visit with my cousin last year, they flew to the UK first, and then they went from the UK to France. And what they did is they changed US dollars in the UK. And what the person did was they converted the US dollars into UK pounds and then converted those pounds into euros. She lost so much money on that exchange rate. And I was just like, oh my gosh, no. And then this trip, she arrived with a bunch of cash, and she was like, well, where do I convert it? And I was like, well, we can't go to the bank because the bank doesn't have any money. So the only option are these change bureau places, and they just never give you a good rate. So this is why I just strongly recommend get the WISE card. And then that way you're taking money out of the ATM and you're not worrying about conversion. You're not worrying about having a bunch of US cash on you. It's just a much more secure option. And frankly, for those of you who heard my Instagram story or my TikTok story about my aunt having her, card number stolen in the Geneva train station, if you have a WISE card, you can tap, so you don't have to swipe. And generally, it's with the swipe machines where your card number is going to get stolen. So this is why it's good to have the tap option. So yes, strongly recommend get the WISE card, W-I-S-E. That's how you should carry cash around Paris. Okay, next thing I forgot to mention, as far as kind of what to do and things to do during your trip, one thing I would say is that if you want to see a lot of kind of the main touristy sites, like a lot of the museums and that sort of thing, invest in a Paris Musée pass, okay? A Paris Musée pass. The thing about this pass is that you pay for it for a certain period of time, right? It's a different price for whether it's 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, whatever. And the point is that it gives you entry to a ton of different like tourist places, museums, etc. And you get the benefit of jumping the line. So you don't have to necessarily always worry about booking a ticket in advance. Let me be clear. Before COVID, you didn't have to worry about booking a ticket in advance with this. You just took that Paris pass. There's a special like entrance for it, like you'll see. It's like Paris Museum Pass. You follow that entrance line. It's always shorter, and then you could go into the museum. I don't know if you have to make a reservation now for a time slot, and then but you still get to jump the line. But the point is, no matter what, with this museum pass, you can jump the lines, and it's just such a better way if you plan to like visit a lot of sites. I also believe it includes the cost of a boat tour on the Seine, so it's a really great value for the money, and so I would strongly recommend you get that if you plan to be doing a lot of tourist attractions. One thing also to note is that the Eiffel Tower, you do tend to have to book those tickets in advance, so I would like be on your hustle to like get those tickets at least 3 weeks in advance of your trip. All right, transport. So I know I talked in transport about how I personally prefer to take the bus, but you can take the metro, etc. I would also recommend that you get what's called a Paris Visite pass. It's a very small paper ticket. It's like this long. You have to write your name on it, and you have to write the date, like the date that it starts and the date that it ends. And it lasts for either 1, 3, or 5 days, and it basically gives you unlimited travel within the Ile-de-France region. So like, for example, if you plan to go to Versailles, like this will also take you to Versailles. So you just have to make sure to get the one that's zone 5 if you plan to go to Versailles during your trip. But the point is that this is a really great card to have. It's not a card, like it's a paper ticket. The issue with it is that it can get very easily demagnetized, which isn't an issue if you're taking the bus, because you can just show it to the bus driver and he'll be like, oh, hey, that's fine. But it is an issue if you're in the metro, and if it does get demagnetized, you have to ask, the person at the counter to kind of help you with that. They do also now have plastic, like the plastic Metro cards that the locals use. They have some of those for visitors, but the thing is you have to have a photo to stick onto it. So there are a little photo kiosk inside of all of the Metros basically, but like, why go through that hassle is kind of my feeling. If you think you can keep track of the paper ticket, like just keep track of the paper ticket. And keep it away from credit card, cell phone, keys, because all of those things will demagnetize it. As far as what to wear when you're coming to Paris, I know that I've done a lot of videos on what to wear, whether you're coming in the spring or the fall. Definitely make sure that you take a look at those videos. But I strongly, strongly, strongly want to recommend that irrespective of the time of year that you come, that you make sure that you bring a pair of sneakers. So in the summer, obviously, you'll probably want a more breathable sneaker. In the winter, you're gonna want something that's, water resistant, waterproof, like something that's like probably like really well constructed. But the point is, no matter what, like bring at least one pair of sneakers. You will not regret it. And the last and final tip, hopefully I have finally gotten them all and I won't think of anything else before I have to release this video to you all. The last and final tip that I really want to give you is as far as etiquette on escalators. You stand on the right and you walk on the left. Do not block across all of the escalators. Someone will come up to you. They will either stand immediately directly behind you and just glare down on you and like breathe on you, which is awful, or or they will be like, move, move, move. So definitely remember, stand to the right, walk on the left. All right, now to the conclusion of the video. Okay, so with that said, I think I have covered it. I have given you all of the travel tips. These are like, this video is the comprehensive travel tip video on visiting Paris. Please feel free to let me know if you have any questions in the comments. I am more than willing to answer anything that I maybe haven't already covered for you. I'm, happy to do that, happy to go into even more detail. Definitely, please let me know. And as always, you can also send me questions on Insta, right? I'm there. So I'm more than willing to answer any of those for you as well. All right. With all of that said, thank you so much for watching. Take care, stay safe, have a wonderful trip to Paris, and I will talk to you again soon.